AM radio, an op-ed column, and Fox News is not enough. I want a center-right nation to fight for its soul, and its soul is represented in the arts. Its soul is represented in a world in which media is everything. AM radio is the lowest form of communication. It's tinny, it's not robust, it's not Avatar. I want Avatar. I want the right to enter the world of media to the extent and invest in media the way that the left does.
The fake media is trying to silence us, but we will not let them, because the people know the truth. The fake media tried to stop us from going to the White House, but I'm president and they're not.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast, a Breitbart.com podcast. The podcast starts now. Here's Curt with today's headlines.
Hey, good morning, guys. Welcome to another edition of the Curt Schilling Podcast. Closing out the week with newsbuster Scott Whitlock talking about fake news, what it actually means in real time. And then Breitbart's John Nolte is going to join us to talk about a lot of very disturbing stuff that the media tends to ignore as it reports its horribly skewed view of the world. We're going to start off, though, with CNN's Jim Acosta, who was on the Late Show on CBS talking about living life on the run as a fugitive from justice and being pursued by American voters and accosted at all sides. Listen up to the tragic story of Jim Acosta.
At the last press briefing, I think this was the last one before they went on vacation, you asked this of Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
All the people around the world are watching what you're saying, Sarah, and the White House for the United States of America, the President of the United States should not refer to us as the enemy of the people. His own daughter acknowledges that, and all I'm asking you to do, Sarah, is to acknowledge that right now and right here.
People seem to...
Not a big deal, right? Just say we're not the enemy of the people,
So what did she eventually say to you? Did she ever say, yeah, you're right, you're not?
She went through a litany of complaints that she had about the way she's been treated, and she talked about the White House Correspondents' Dinner where comedian Michelle Wolf made some unflattering comments about her. I said, hey, listen, I'm sorry that you've been put through the meat grinder. We all get put through the meat grinder in this town. But at the end of the day, you shouldn't be referring to journalists as the enemy of the people. We're not the enemy of the people.
You've gotten singled out by the president quite specifically in his disdain for you and for CNN, and you've gotten some notoriety for pushing back in the way that you have. Are you an outlier, or are you merely saying the things that everyone in the press corps is saying, but just not in front of a camera?
No, we're all fed up with the treatment that we're receiving, and I'm not the only one to speak out about this. Listen.
But you're famous for it because you particularly get picked on by him, and you particularly push back.
Well, I push
back. Why do you think you have that relationship with him?
I mean, listen. Here's the way I describe it. This was going on during the campaign. He referred to us as the disgusting news media, the dishonest news media, liars, scum, and thieves, and so on. And then at that infamous press conference, January 11th of 2017, 9 days before he became President of the United States, he would not take a question from me from CNN about the dossier and about this intelligence assessment that the intelligence community was giving to the incoming president, that you might be compromised with this information that the Russians have. And he would not take the question, and he said, you're fake news. And to me, when you insult our news organization, when you call us fake news, the way I look at it, hey, that's calling on me for a question. The same thing happened in Britain a few weeks ago when he called us fake news at a news conference with the British Prime Minister right in front of us. He calls us fake news, refers to CNN as fake news. I look at that as he's calling on me for a question.
No, he's really not calling on you for a question. And if Jim Acosta had one testicle, this is what happened. You notice Jim Acosta was a guest on a nightline talk show. Who the hell cares about Jim Acosta? He's a reporter. But it is another sign that the media is as interested in being the news as reporting the news. If Jim Acosta had 1 ounce of integrity, he would have put out a statement that said, I've been invited to appear on The Late Show to talk about my situation. My job is to report the news and to continue to try and report fair and balanced news. I don't feel it would be appropriate for me to be in this situation. So I'm going to keep trying to push this administration for the truth while trying to report the news instead of be a part of the news. Instead, he goes on and tells you what a horrible life he's living, basically without admitting that the reason all of those things are happening to him is because he's lying to us, because he is being deceitful. He is lying by omission and addition. And, you know, he has tried to be as much a part of the press conference as being a reporter at the press conference. And hey, he's famous for it now, so he got what he wanted. And the left got what they wanted, which is a guy who has grandstanded his way into being someone that people now know. And I don't care any more about Jim Acosta today than I did 18 months ago. I think he's done a grave disservice to his profession, and I think he knows that. So anyway, Laura Ingraham, who I am a fan of. Laura is another one of those women who feminists are terrified of because she represents exactly what feminism, I think, was launched to create, which is the strong, independent, self-reliant woman, incredibly smart. And I would love to see Laura Ingraham and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the same stage together. But anyway, listen to her talk about Ocasio-Cortez's criticisms of Democratic leadership, and that she said that she's an avowed socialist. She said that we're stuck in the 90s. Listen up.
Because in some parts of the country, it does seem like the America that we know and love doesn't exist anymore. Massive demographic changes have been foisted upon the American people. And they're changes that none of us ever voted for, and most of us don't like. From Virginia to California, we see stark examples of how radically, in some ways, the country has changed. Now, much of this is related to both illegal and, in some cases, legal immigration that, of course, progressives love. Remember the old Democrats, maybe some of them that Ocasio-Cortez referring to, they used to think that borders mattered. But the new activists believe enforcing immigration laws is essentially an ongoing human rights violation. Of course, they want to abolish ICE and so forth. Well, today we were reminded again of why our law has to be enforced, borders strengthened, and the wall built, loopholes closed, and sanctuary city policies ended once and for all. Check out what happened courtesy of Philadelphia's refusal to cooperate with ICE detainers. In May of 2009, Juan Ramon Vasquez, a citizen of Honduras, was deported from the United States. Just 5 years later, in March 2014, ICE officers found out that Vasquez was back in the U.S. and was in custody with the Philadelphia Department of Prisons. Philadelphia, however, refused to comply with an ICE detainer request, so Vasquez was instead released from custody. After his release, Vasquez was rearrested and ultimately convicted for child rape. This is an unspeakable act of evil that should have never occurred and never occurred on American soil.
I keep saying, guys, the amount of time and effort people are putting in to defend criminals at the border and defend MS-13, which the left has continually done, is stunning to me in the face of the children whose lives have been taken by illegals daily. And no, it's not a majority of them, but one is too many. And every one of these murders, every one of these lives that has been snuffed out by someone on the left or by someone the left supports in illegal immigrants and illegal immigration is something that didn't have to happen. And then you had, I don't know how this guy is even remotely. I don't think he's interesting. I don't think he's. I think his 25 minutes in the window of fame was a nightmare. On CNN's Wolf, former White House communications director, which is sad that we have to refer to him as that, Anthony Scaramucci talked about Laura Ingram's commentary on the changing demographics in America. Listen to what this guy had to say.
I like her as a person, but if you remember Father Tom Coughlin in the 1930s, my grandparents certainly remember him, and, you know, it's the same rhetoric, it's the same sentence structure, and it's the same level of xenophobia that, frankly, my immigrant grandparents faced as Italian Americans 70, 80 short years ago. So I'm not in love with it. I love the concept of America, the ideas of America, and the great experiment of our republic, where we really are, what Lincoln said, the last best hope for mankind, because we have our diversity. We get our strength from that diversity. And one last point, Lee Kuan Yew once said about America, Wolf, that we have such a competitive advantage around the world because you can come to the United States as a Chinese or a German and become a German American or a Chinese American, but that's not true going to those other countries. And so that's a huge competitive advantage that we have versus the rest of the world in terms of the intellectual capital. And I really wish he wouldn't talk like that because it sounds ignorant. And it's unfortunate, particularly if you know your grandparents' immigration story or you yourself are an immigrant. So I hope she walks it back. I hope she realizes that what she said is it's against the American values that she's supposedly touting.
No, it's not. She was very clear what she was touting, and he's part of the problem now. But I guess he is absolutely a part of the swamp. And we got two more soundbites I want to play for you. I wanted you to listen to NBC's Late Night. NBC Nightly News' Lester Holt talked about being called fake. Again, the left is lamenting about their incredibly uncomfortable lives now, being on the run from all of these pitchforks and torches. You know, you remember seeing the photos of Jim Acosta at the rally where he was heckled and taking selfies with the people who were apparently heckling him. But listen to Lester Holt embellish again.
You are a member of the media, and you, as a collective, as have been explained to me by our president, are an enemy of the people. And he's recently tweeted that you are dangerous and sick. Is it strange to be representing a profession right now that the president of the United States is just full bore attacking on a daily basis?
You know, I let the fake news stuff roll off my back. It's not fun. But I think most people understand an organization like ours, and a lot of the organizations under fire have been doing this for decades and decades, and we've earned a lot of trust with our audiences and a tradition of excellence. So I let that roll. I think where I draw the line, though, is the safety and well-being of my colleagues. And enemy of the people, I think, crosses a line. I think it's reckless. I respectfully ask that it end, and that's what I have to say about it.
And I'm going to say this again. If you want it to end, the easiest way to make it end is to stop doing what you're doing. Stop lying. Stop misrepresenting. Stop trying to tell us that you're impartial and unbiased, because all of that's a lie. And I don't know if other people get this, but I get offended by the fact that they think we're that stupid. They really do think we're that stupid, that naive, that we have that little awareness that we would look at them and listen to the things they're saying and doing and not be questioning the methods with which they're saying and doing it. You know, they're fake news because that's what they're reporting. They're reporting things that aren't happening, and it's not news. News is to talk about the fact that the stock market went up or down. News is to talk about the accident on I-95. The news is about factual events. What they're doing is stating opinion, and they're trying to present their opinion as news and as fact, and it's not. So, and then finally, you're going to hear me talk about it later, but I've never been a fan of Kanye West. I don't like the music. I'm not a big fan. I think he's been kind of a dope in the past. For whatever reason, I just don't like him. But the fact of the matter is, on Jimmy Kimmel Live, Kanye West went on and basically explained which he shouldn't have to do anyway, but explained the whole "Make America Great Again" hat thing. And listen to the man be honest.
Some people were very happy when you said you liked President Trump. Do you think he is a good president?
You're going to ask me, can I answer the first question you're going to ask?
Answer whatever you want.
Well, you know, it's funny, you know, in this world that we live in, there's two main motivating forces, and I tweet about it all the time. It's love or fear. And you can't explain love. You know, my cousin is locked up for murder, and I love him. I saw he did a bad thing, but I still love him. And just as a musician, African-American, guy out in Hollywood, all these different things, you know, everyone around me tried to pick my candidate for me. Mm-hmm. And then told me every time I said I like Trump that I couldn't say it out loud or my career would be over. I'd get kicked out the black community because blacks we're supposed to have a monolithic thought. We can only be Democrats and all. So even when I said it right before I went to the hospital and I expressed myself, and when I came out, I had lost my confidence. So I didn't have the confidence to take on the world and the possible backlash. And it took me a year and a half to have the confidence to stand up and put on the hat, no matter what the consequences were. And what it represented to me is not about policies, and because I'm not a politician like that, but it represented overcoming fear and doing what you felt, no matter what anyone said, and saying, you can't bully me. Liberals can't bully me, news can't bully me, the hip-hop community, they can't bully me. Because at that point, if I'm afraid to be me, I'm no longer Ye. That's what makes Ye. And I actually quite enjoy when people actually are mad at me about certain things.
I'm not sure why he has to explain himself, but he's doing it. And he's not backing down, which is impressive. But again, when you look at, I don't know if you guys know that I have a blog on WordPress. It's at 38pitches.wordpress.com. I was writing this big article about, you heard Candace Owens the other day talking about the event in Philadelphia, and I was going to write this big article about what a tragedy that was. And instead, I ended up posting 5 pictures that sum up better than any article I could have ever written, what it means to be or what it feels and looks to be black today as opposed to the 60s. There's a picture of a woman being shouted out of a school by white people. And then there's a picture alongside of that, no pun intended, that's in color, of Candace Owens being shouted out by white people of a restaurant. And then it's just, if you have a chance to check it out, I'd be curious to know what people think. But I think it's absolutely true. And Kanye West is a black man who is going to be called an Uncle Tom, a traitor to his race, and all these other things because he's a man who stands up for what he believes in. And I would tell you, as young men, that's the only thing you have. You have your word, and that's the one thing you'll go to your grave with, or not. You get to choose. And to be true to yourself is the only thing. If you want to live a good life, it's the only thing you can do. Is be true to yourself, because you're going to be unhappy otherwise. We're going to take a short break. On the flip side, Scott Whitlock from Newsbusters will join me back in just a minute.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlowe.
Jeannie in Pennsylvania.
I think he's gotten away from what we really hired him to do, which is draining the swamp. If you look at the real picture of draining a swamp, you go in and you take all the water out of it. What does it leave? It leaves the gunk. He cannot get rid of the gunk. We have to get rid of the gunk. Everything he's doing, he's lowering the water so we can see who needs to go. The only way they can go is if we vote them out.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on SiriusXM Patriot 125.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Joining me now is the associate editor for the Media Research Center's newsbuster.org website. He is Scott Whitlock. Good morning, Scott. How you doing, buddy?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. I don't have enough time today. I mean, I could spend all day asking you. But one of the I just played a bunch of sound bites, and you hear Acosta and Lester Holt and all these people in the media complaining about being picked on because of the things that they do and say. And in no way, shape, or form do they take a responsibility for the misrepresentation of the news that they've been representing. And there's a bunch of stuff on newsbusters.org. Guys, newsbusters.org is a website. Check it out. First and foremost, Chris Collins, who was a Republican congressman, was arrested, as he should have been, because he's committed multiple crimes, and it appears to be multiple felonies. But I argue you don't have to actually lie to my face. You can lie by omission. And one of the ways in which they've done this is this thing, the Collins thing, has gotten covered as if it was the Kennedy assassination. When we're watching Democrats who are convicted of fraud and other crimes barely get a mention, and you guys have seen an enormous percentage of time taken in the media that in that manner, and I'm wondering how do you explain that to people?
Well, the networks are the ones who would have to explain it, and they really don't have any good answer because, what we did was we looked at the first 24 hours of the Chris Collins coverage, and in that 24 hours, it was over 18 minutes. And then we looked at the entirety of the coverage of Chaka Fattah, a Democratic congressman who was convicted of bribery and fraud, and Congresswoman Corinne Brown, who was convicted of fraud. She got zero coverage for the entire trial, for the indictment, for the trial, for the conviction. Chaka Fattah got 68 seconds for the entirety of his trial. So we're not talking about the first 24 hours. We're talking about the whole thing. And they just weren't interested. And I think this really, yet again, shows the example of the partisan double standard because, as you said, we're not saying this Chris Collins is a good guy. We're not saying this shouldn't be covered. The charges are very serious. Sounds like he may have done bad things. So not defending him at all. But when politicians are corrupt, the things they're doing in that corruption should be covered regardless of whether they're Democrats or Republicans. But that's the kind of thing that the networks haven't been doing. They didn't do it during Obama, and now suddenly with Trump, they're really interested in this Collins guy, and they really like to hype the fact that he endorsed Donald Trump.
Big brother in the internet and Google and Facebook, and the fact that they're saturating coverage in very ideological ways. Then comes news out of Kansas about Chris Kobach, who apparently is a hard right, staunchly, I don't know what an incredibly conservative choice means, but I'm just going to assume it's because he abides by the Constitution and recognizes the Constitution as a founding document that he's a terror to the liberal media. But in contrast with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who could be living in Russia today if we truly believe she believes the things she says, and she would be happy, she has been... she's the wonder child of the left and the the face of the party, and they don't come more radical than her. Now we have the first piece is kind of lying by omission. Now this is lying in a sense that misrepresent. I guess this is misrepresenting the left and the right in the news as well.
Well, yeah, because I think most conservatives don't have any problem with being called conservatives. They'd say, well, we are. But the problem is when you get into these terms like hard right, incredibly right, and so on, where you're clearly trying to say this person is scary. That's where the problem comes in. And then also, again, it's the double standard, because we did Rich Noyes of the MRC, our research director, did another study with the new Supreme Court pick, and he went back and looked, and for every conservative Supreme Court nominee, a Clarence Thomas or a Alito or a Gorsuch, we get these type of worrisome terms about just how conservative they are. But when you get a Ruth Bader Ginsburg or any of Obama's nominees, those terms are almost the liberal version, I should say. Those terms are almost never used because they just, well, those people are normal and they just, that's how they view it. Those people are just kind of regular and they're not extreme, and it's just such hypocrisy. And this is why people don't like the media. This is why people talk about fake news.
And then we have, it just runs the gamut. Then we have, if you remember back, the shooting at the newspaper we found out this gentleman had a decades-long beef with this newspaper for defamation. There were multiple law enforcement incidences involving both parties and him threatening, and the media made it clear that they believed, and Hollywood as well, believed that the president was 100% responsible, even though for the weeks leading up to this, you had Maxine Waters and other Democrats telling people to publicly harass Trump. We recognize that shooting had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with someone who was off the hinge. But now you have MSNBC talking about the fact that the Charlie Hebdo shooting that happened a couple months back. Without question, we're going to have one, they said, and it will be because of the behavior of this president. While they disavow and don't acknowledge, Candace Owens was basically treated like a 1960s civil rights marcher in Philadelphia by white people as a black woman, strong black conservative woman, being surrounded by police officers of all races, and the white people were calling them all racist.
Right. Yeah. No. This is. This is a great example, and it just shows the way you described it. Yeah, I think that a lot of these journalists, some of them on CNN and MSNBC, and there was a New York Times columnist who said that Trump will have blood on their hands. I'm not saying they want violence, but they eagerly want when there is a violent incident to be able to blame this on the president and blame this on conservatives. And we saw that with that newspaper shooting, that they immediately wanted to go there, even though there was no reason to go there. But they wanted to say that this was the president and this was conservatives. And that just shows you there's the liberal resistance. And a lot of these journalists and people on CNN and MSNBC and on the networks are part of the resistance too. And they are primed and ready, I think, to blame anything that happens on the president. And in contrast, there was in Oregon, there was this art gallery, the big art gallery that had a painting, a mural of Donald Trump getting his throat cut. And so where is this sort of outrage and the same sort of, you're going to get a crazy person to go out and try and do something horrible to the president and the left will be responsible? We don't see that at all.
And to close up and round up just how fake the news is, Stephanie Ruhle on MSNBC Live the other day was commenting, and I've come to believe this to be the case across the board. Left-wing, whether they be radical or Democrat or they don't actually know what socialism is. They've been asked to explain what a progressive is. They can't do it. She's on the news, and she's mocking people, saying, socialism, oh, my God, people are going to take all my money, not understanding. She clearly doesn't have a concept of what socialism is. But the fact of the matter is, they're misrepresenting the stance of a party that is spewing out anti-American, anti-capitalist, free market ideas without knowing what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think we've seen a few things with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. One of them is initially some of the coverage. They said socialist, but then it was sort of downplayed. And when she was interviewed on CBS, it was very, very softball. So they didn't want to go there. And on the networks, we've largely seen they've kind of have tried to ignore her because she has, as I'm sure you know, botched a number of interviews.
Well, she's not a smart woman.
Right.
I don't mean that as this is a woman who talked about the Israeli occupation of Palestine while touting on her resume a degree in foreign relations from BU. That's just funny.
Right. Yeah. So that's a good way to put it. Is that she doesn't really know what she's talking about. So there's been an effort to kind of sweep it under the rug and just not cover her embarrassing things that she says about Israel or these other places. But I think it is a real problem for them because if you see socialism growing as a force and people really want this within the Democratic Party, that's going to be a real problem because that's not mainstream within this country. So I think they're going to have a real issue with trying to either downplay it or, as you said, kind of minimize what it really is.
Well, and Scott, they can't point to a time or place in history where socialism has ever made a country better, made people better. It's never worked. We're not that far from Venezuela. How are we not acknowledging that socialism is the reason Venezuela is a complete, hot mess, and people, the things that are happening there are subhuman. This is why the media is being attacked, and I use attacked in air quotes. They're not actually being attacked. These aren't actually people, unlike the liberals who shut up a softball practice and have made it clear that they're making and doing things in motivation from the left. This is a group of people like you and I who, when we protest, we do so by the law and legally, but. It almost feels like, and I still believe that the Charlottesville thing was a scam in many ways, because the left has managed to paint the group of people who were there protesting against, protesting for, in defense of free speech. Somehow they associated that with the Nazi white supremacist group that was there as well, which we found out had some ties to the left anyway. But this is why the media is being attacked, and they're trying to paint it as something unfair. Also, I haven't heard anyone say anything to anyone about being physically violent the way Candace Owens was treated this weekend.
Right, and I mean, yeah, that's a good point. And with Costa specifically, for how much he's complained about this, if you look at that video, look, those people were maybe saying, they were flipping him off and saying vulgar things, which I wouldn't. I don't like that or wouldn't encourage that, but that's not violence. That is saying
but
I
Scott,
don't like
I also saw in that same crowd him taking selfies and pictures with these same people. I mean, then he comes on and has the nerve to try and tell us, my God, I felt like my life was in danger. I mean, come on, dude. That's why the president calls you fake news, and they don't admit any culpability, none. I mean, listen. All you have to know about this media is this is the same media that 3 years ago in July, Chris Matthews sat back and basically called President Obama immaculate and perfect. And as you said in the article, quote, he's been immaculate in the presidency. Nobody has accused him of any corruption. His kids are perfect. His wife is perfect. And he got a big tingle up his leg at the same time.
Yeah. So, people don't like the media because they don't like the coverage and they don't like fake news. No one is saying, and no one should threaten anyone, journalist or not. But Costa wants to turn booing and dislike for how and what journalists are doing to this country into somehow threats against them. It's really absurd.
Yeah. Hey, listen, Scott, it's always a pleasure, buddy. You guys have been great to me, and I always enjoy having you guys on here. Don't have you on enough, but I would love to have you back.
Thanks for having me on. I'm a lifelong Phillies fan, so it's always a thrill.
Oh, that's great. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
A lot of people not knowing what action they could or should take to make the difference. What I do is try to turn people on to sites like Breitbart, people who are writing and publishing the truth so that people will get educated. But, you kind of can't blame productive members of society who are kind of confused, perplexed as to what do we do to take this government back.
Sirius XM Patriot Channel 125.
We want to hear from you. Tweet the show at Garrick38. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Joining me now, as he has often in the past, and another guy who I never, ever get enough time with because he's got so much content on Breitbart and every bit of it is relevant, important, and revealing. He is Breitbart's John Nolte. Good morning, John. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Happy Friday to you and to everyone out there.
You too as well. I want to get right to it. You've done some really good stuff, and one of the things, and I was just talking with Scott Whitlock from Newsbusters, and one of the and I played sound bites today from Jim Acosta and the rest of the media crying about being called names and being mistreated, and I've been telling people one of the reasons why is not just the lies, but the misrepresentation, the lie by omission. We're being told on a daily basis that Black America hates Donald Trump. And yet you and I are seeing differences of opinion. The black support for President Trump has doubled in the last year. It's still not where I want it to be, where I think it should be. But the fact of the matter is there's an NAACP poll out that is showing black Americans and their support for President Trump is actually rising and rising quickly. And I was wondering if you could just explain to people the real truth about black support for President Trump and how it's changing.
I think it's important to go all the way back to 2016, the 2016 presidential election.
Right.
Mitt Romney in 2012 got 6% of the vote. Black vote. He patronized and condescended to the black community in order to get that 6%. Trump walked away in 2016 with 8% of the black vote, which is just 1 point below John McCain.
Right.
Now we are seeing in numerous polls, including an NAACP poll and a Rasmussen poll, that Trump support in the black community is 21% of registered voters and 29% of likely voters. And the likely voter screen is an important screen. It's the most accurate screen, and Rasmussen was one of the most accurate pollsters in 2016. So if Trump is picking up that kind of support in the black community, that is anything over or near 15% is the end of the Democrat Party.
I want to talk about that for a second. Those numbers, even though they sound 1 in 5, I don't think people understand the magnitude of that, the volume of votes that actually represents. That is a massive swing. And you're talking about, well, I mean, there were districts in Philadelphia where Obama took 100% of the vote, even though we know that was totally rigged. But the fact of the matter is, this is a seismic change. And you just said it. If we truly are looking at close to 30% of likely black voters voting for President Trump, we'll never, ever have another Democratic president in our lifetime, which is euphoria, right? Yeah, there's no way the Democrats can survive unless they continue to capture 90, 88, 85% of the black vote. Right. And Trump is not condescending. He's not patronizing. Right. He is fighting back against his critics. And I think this is what the black community respects. Romney and McCain always looked weak, kissing butt. And Trump is just saying, I'm going to get you all jobs. And if LeBron comes at me, if he starts it, I'm going to go at LeBron. And that people respect that. That's what he has. He is earning respect. He's earned the respect of Kanye West, who just defended Trump yesterday with Jimmy Kimmel. So he's winning the black vote by being himself, by being tough against all his opponents, by refusing to respect the sacred cows. And when you respect sacred cows, you look weak. John, he's especially doing it because the unemployment rate in the black community right now is at a record low. Just as it is for women, just as it is for Hispanics. He is producing. He is not talking down to the black voter. Which is one of the things I think you and I and people at Breitbart and people throughout the years have tried to make the black community see. Listen, we don't think you're less than. We don't talk about you like Democrats do, which is, oh, you know what, here's your welfare. You just go on and vote Democrat and we'll take care of you. You look at people like Candace Owens and Ben Carson and Kanye. These people are trying to inspire black people to take advantage of the dream that's in front of them. Yes, there is no doubt in our minds. We can acknowledge history. They've had, from a horrific presence in the 1800s and before that, to the Civil War, to slavery ending, to segregation. It's been an uphill climb for them. But finally, I think there's a horizon that they can actually see. And they can be a part of that American dream the same way anybody else is. Yeah, and I think it's also important to point out that most are. It's just a larger percentage of black people that live in poverty than white people, even though that is another number that Trump is narrowing right now. And we had a black president for 8 years who did nothing for the black community except condescend like every left-winger does with his government handouts. He told the black community, I'm going to flood this country with illegal immigrants that are going to take those starter jobs on construction sites and elsewhere that are so important to your youth. He told the black community, I am going to that the manufacturing jobs could only be brought back with a magic wand, and those manufacturing jobs are hugely important in the Rust Belt states with huge amounts of black people, especially among the working class. And Trump is delivering. And the only complaints anyone has about Trump is style. On the substance, on the policies, on the results. He does and says things that make it 10 times harder for him to be president. But the fact of the matter is he's a pragmatist. He's solving problems for the black community in a way our first black president, the first duly elected black man in the history of the world, failed his people at. Yeah, and if you want to see the failure of the black community, if you want to see the failure of community organizing, that whole philosophy, just go to Chicago. 50 people were shot last weekend. 50 people over 2 days. And you know that unfortunately, a majority of them were black. A disproportionate number of them were black. And they are the failure in the black community. And Trump was the first one during the campaign to have the courage to say that. What have you got to lose? The failure of Democrats in your community. All of these burnt out, shelled out communities,
Baltimore, Chicago, Los Angeles, the list goes on and on. They're run by Democrats and have been for decades. And Trump is the first person to have the courage to say that, because when you say that truth, you are hammered by the media because they don't want that truth out there.
I don't know if you saw this yesterday, but the fact of the matter is this. I had this big blog post to write up yesterday about Candace Owens and what happened to her. And then at the end of the post, I literally erased the entire thing, and I posted 5 pictures. And one picture was of a young lady who was part of a group called the Nine, a black woman in the 60s, who was being accosted in public by people, all white people, screaming at her during the Civil Rights March. And I posted next to it a picture of Candace Owens, the same exact photo, only this time, no pun intended, it was in color. And it was all white people again shouting at a black woman to remove herself from a public place. This woman was surrounded by black, brown, Latino, and women police officers, and the white people were calling her a racist. Alongside another picture of Antifa dressed in black, holding their Antifa flag, which are a knockoff of the German swastika flag, next to a picture of Hitler's brown shirts. The pictures are literally the same thing, 50, 60, 70, almost 100 years apart. The Democratic Party hasn't changed its stance on blacks at all. And I think right now you and I are seeing what, and on Twitter it's called #WalkAway, but I think we're seeing a great awakening in the black community, which I can't think of anything more profound than having black Americans being empowered and understanding the powers of a free market and capitalism.
And that's why Democrats, going back to slavery, the Ku Klux Klan, and the segregated South, that was all Democrats. And what their position was that black people who threatened their power had to be destroyed. And that's what we are seeing now with Kanye West, and we are seeing with Candace Owens. Black people who threaten the power of the Democrat Party must be destroyed. And there you have Candace Owens surrounded by a bunch of white Democrat racists screaming at her, chasing her out of a restaurant, no different than 50, 60 years ago when white Democrat racists chased a woman out of a school. They didn't want her to go to a school. They threatened their power.
I keep asking this question, and I always pose this question to smart people. I'm going to pose it to you. After the Civil War, we passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Those amendments were presented to the people to make everybody equal, to level the playing field. Everybody could vote. Everybody could participate in everything that was American. It didn't matter what color you were. If we passed those amendments and we had those laws, why did it take almost 100 years and another civil rights march for blacks to get equal treatment?
Yeah, and it was Democrats.
Exactly. Period. That's exactly
sometimes
why
by
it happened.
100%. 100% of Democrats came out against those as 100% of Republicans, and nothing has changed. The only thing that's changed is that Democrats scream racist. Democrats claim that they're not the racists, and yet they are the ones screaming at a black woman who threatens their power until she's forced to leave a restaurant, throwing eggs and throwing water at her. And who protects it? The media. The media doesn't report on that.
I go back to the beginning of Antifa. I mean, Antifa the left is a group of people who profess to hate and despise the very people they are. Antifa is a group of people using fascist tactics, brown shirt 1930 tactics, to fight what they say they're fighting fascism. They're a group of fascists calling themselves anti-fascist. This would be like the KKK calling themselves the NAACP.
It is, and this is something that Orwell and Churchill both predicted. They both said that the next wave of fascism will come in the form of anti-fascism, and that's exactly what we are seeing. That's exactly what they've done, is manipulate the language. And none of this would be possible if the media would just tell the truth. There is not a single Trump supporter who has ever committed an act of violence against anyone in the media, and they better not. But not once has a Trump supporter committed an act of violence against the media. We have 10 incidents of Antifa committing acts of violence against the media. And the media says nothing.
I wanted to get an update from you. For those of you who don't know, you got to go back. You got to go to Breitbart first off and search John Nolte's name. His content is absolutely out of this world. You started a list of events that since the election came about, and they were events and incidences of violence or public hatred towards Trump supporters by by liberals and Democrats. And that list, I think, started out as like 40 events, which was pretty impressive. But you opened that up and allowed the public to submit events that they could, and I actually even had one happen. I'm wondering what that list, how big did that list eventually get, or is it still growing?
What I've done with the list, it's up to 544 right now. And if you go to Breitbart, and that is acts of not debate, not argument, not disagreement, not even hostility. It's acts of menacing, it's acts of vandalism, it's acts of violence, and it is people justifying violence or calling for violence, which we see all the time on CNN. That's what that list is. It's not just people raising their voice. It's people bullying other people, either physically or just by mob violence. And what I've done is I've got it all backfilled. I had to go back and fill everything up to the past couple of years. So now what I'm doing is just adding the new ones as they come out. And I've got 4 or 5 I've got to add this week. But yeah, those are documented. That and I'm not taking people's anecdotes. I'm not taking. This is either it's on film, or it's been repeated, or it's been reported in local media because the national media never covers it. Or if they do, they wrist flick it. Or if CNN covers it, they say that we have it coming. We provoked it.
Scott Whitlock he was talking about the fact that Chris Collins, who should go to jail if he committed these crimes, which I'm assuming he did, got 18 minutes of coverage in a 24-hour period. And there was 2 different Democratic people who were found charges of the same thing. And during the entire cycle of their incidents, they had a combined total of 69 seconds of coverage from the media. It's just not even. It's the lie by omission. And I would tell you, can we not trace a direct line from Maxine Waters' mouth to the Philadelphia streets the other day, where Candace Owens was publicly accosted and legally assaulted by white protesters? That's what she was asking people to do, and they did it. And there is no yeah, but in this one. Yeah, but you guys, or yeah, but conservatives. That's not how this works. The last time I heard of a conservative being violent in public was when a member of the NRA shot and killed the mass shooter in Texas coming out of the church.
The last thing I remember the media being outraged over, and I'm not even sure if this person was a Republican or a conservative because he had done the same thing with George W. Bush, was a rodeo clown in Texas who wore an Obama mask. That's the last thing I remember the media being outraged over.
They wanted him jail.
And he was disappeared. He was told he would never work again. He was harassed until he could never work again. And yet we have 544 incidents of violence and harassment and menacing and bullying and vandalism, and the media does not care. And yeah, it is. And that's why, my mentality is now I'm tired of complaining about the media. We just need to be our own media. We need to build our own media. To hell with CNN. Who cares if they're lying? Of course they're lying. We need to get the word out. That's what we need to do. And we need to keep building an infrastructure where people can get this information. They can get the truth because CNN is lying to them. Complaining about CNN, it's just a here we go again story. And it's much more important we get the real news out, like the news about the NAACP poll, which the NAACP itself downplayed by pointing to a bunch of other stuff that doesn't matter. The only thing that mattered in that NAACP poll was 21% black support for Trump.
Listen, I never get enough time with you. But I got to tell you, when I look at what you're doing and I look around at the media in general, I am absolutely I'm proud of the fact that I still work at a place that where the real news matters, and you're one of the few people who are playing both sides of the fence here in a good way. You've come out with criticism where it's deserved in the Trump administration, but you've also been able to, and I'm assuming much to the chagrin of your personal life, because I know anybody that's out there publicly working for this administration or trying to tell the truth is getting verbally stoned. But keep doing what you're doing, John. It's great stuff, man.
Well, I appreciate that very much, Curt. Back at you, and have a great weekend.
My winner was an easy one. I am and have never been a fan of his music. I think there were some things that he said and done in the past that I don't agree with. I've never really been a fan of the guy. But if you watched Jimmy Kimmel, you heard that soundbite earlier today, Kanye West took a stand. And it's very different, I think, for people of color to take a stand for Trump than it is for people that aren't of color. Because there is literally potential threats and physical violence on the other end for them in ways that only the KKK could emulate and imagine. But Kanye West is going to be my winner today. He took the question and didn't back down and basically said, hey, this is who I am. That is someone who's putting something up professionally that could cost him, and the fact that he did it, well, it's cool. I love the fact that it's happening. Like I said, the numbers are staggering. 2012, the black vote was 6% Romney. 2016, it was 8% Trump, which was 1% less than McCain had in 2012, which was 9%. NAACP poll says registered voters, 21% of the black registered vote is a Trump supporter. 29% of likely voters are Trump supporters. Guys, that is basically giving the last rites to the Democratic Party, which means to me that they're going to have to try and do things off the grid, off the radar, outside the bounds of legal means to win an election again. And I have no idea how they're going to do that. I know they're going to try. I had two losers today, and I didn't know which one to pick, so I'm going to pick both. I'm going to go with the leadership in Chicago, who has continued to watch its citizens, starting with Rahm Emanuel, be murdered at record paces and record rates day after day after day and done nothing about it. And the other one is, in no comparison, but it's still an evil, human trafficking, most especially child trafficking, child pornography, pedophilia. The human trafficking industry is estimated to now be a $32 billion industry, billion with a B. And you're seeing one of the things that's starting to hopefully put a dent in that is I think we're north of 40,000 federal sealed indictments, and sex traffickers and trafficking of children. People are being arrested left and right under the radar. When it becomes public, it is going to be the scandal of our lifetimes, because it's going to involve people that we know, involve people's names that we know. Guys, thank you so much. This was another great week. My producer continues to just kick ass and take names. And he's also very excited now because Andrew Luck's back on the field. But you guys have a great weekend, and we will be back on Monday. God bless. Have a good one. Thanks again, guys.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson.
Everything in hip-hop is not bad. Kanye agreed with us, so let's love him today until he raps tomorrow and you turn your back. Because if you jump off when the fun of the moment is over, then you are in fact making Kanye the token he is accused of being. So please, don't do that. Don't go there.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson. Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.